What's up, YouTube? We're back with another War of the Spark pre-release video, and this time we're going to talk about the creatures in the set. So we're going to start off with the removal spells we missed in the last video. So we did not talk about Prison Realm. This is a 3-mana white enchantment, and when it enters the battlefield, you can exile target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls until it leaves the battlefield, and you get to scry 1. The next one we missed was Bleeding Edge, which is a black spell, 3-mana sorcery. Up to 1 target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn, and amass 2. It's worth noting that it says up to 1 target creature, so you could just use it to amass 2 if you needed to. You want to take the next one?
Then we have D-Spark, a 2-mana instant that says exile target permanent with converted mana cost 4 or greater. Just an all-around good removal spell, and if you're playing black and white and open one of these, you're going to hope you have multiples.
Alright, so now we're going to start off with the white creatures. So Johnny's Pridemate, this is a reprint. The only thing worth noting is that it's no longer a May ability. You always put the +1/+1 counter on it.
Next is Bulwark Giant, 6-mana 3/6. When Bulwark Giant enters the battlefield, you gain 5 life. So just a big bulky creature.
Gaining life is pretty relevant in this format too, and something to take into consideration is that none of the removal spells that deal damage or lower toughness can kill a 6 toughness creature, so that's actually pretty valuable even though it doesn't look like it. Next we have Charmed Stray, which is a 1-mana 1/1 with lifelink, and when it enters the battlefield you get a 1/1 counter on each other creature you control named Charmed Stray, so they're good in multiples. They're not really good by themselves if you only open 1.
Next is Enforcer Griffin, 5-mana 3/4 with flying. So just vanilla outside of the flying portion of it, but 3 power is pretty big when you take out chunks of life.
And 4 toughness does dodge a lot of the red removal spells. And next we have the God Eternal Oketra. If you open a god, you're playing it. It's that simple. This is a 5-mana 3/6 with double strike, so it will effectively do 6 points of damage in combat. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you create a 4/4 black zombie warrior creature token with vigilance. And then all of the gods have the same ability. Whenever they die or enter the exile zone from the battlefield, you can put it 3rd from the top in your library.
Next is Grateful Apparition, a 2-mana 1/1 with flying, but whenever Grateful Apparition deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, you get to proliferate.
So you're probably not going to really want to play this unless you have a lot of things that add counters. 2 mana for a 1/1 flyer is not really that great of a card. Next we have Ironclad Crovad, which is a 4-mana 2/5. It's vanilla, doesn't do anything. If you need filler, you can play this. 5 toughness is pretty good in the format, but other than that, it's pretty boring.
Next you have Law Rune Enforcer, a 1-mana 1/2. You can pay 1, tap it to tap target creature with converted mana cost 2 or greater. Good to just help you get in for the last couple points of damage if you need to.
And then we have Loxodon Sergeant, which is a 4-mana 3/3 with Vigilance. And when it enters the battlefield, other creatures you control gain Vigilance till end turn. So this is just good to attack with all your creatures, but not actually have to tap any of them down.
Next is Makeshift Battalion, a 3-mana 3/2. Whenever Makeshift Battalion and at least 2 other creatures attack, put a +1/+1 counter on Makeshift Battalion. The nice part, I guess, about this is the fact that it is a counter. It doesn't just get +1/+1 until end of turn.
Other than that, if you're playing a hyper-aggressive deck, it's fine, but if you don't have a lot of 1 and 2 drops, it's probably not going to get any extra value beyond being a 3/2. And then we have Martyr for the Cause, which is a 2-mana 2/2. When it dies, you proliferate. You probably aren't going to play this unless you have a lot of +1/+1 counters or planeswalkers, just because you may not actually get to use the death ability, and then it's just a bear.
Next is Parhelion 2, an 8-mana legendary artifact vehicle. Has a lot of text on it, so despite it only being a rare, it's a flying, first strike, and vigilance. When it attacks, you get to create 2 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance that are attacking. And then it takes crew 4, which seems like a lot, but I think in this format it might be a little bit slower. So you should be able to get to it if you open it.
Yeah, the real hard part is going to be casting it, because it is 8 mana, but if you open it and you can cast it, it's probably going to end the game. And then we have Pouncing Lynx, which is a 2-mana 2/1, and it has first strike on your turn. Don't play this card.
Next is Rising Populace. 3-mana 2/2. Whenever another creature or planeswalker you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Rising Populace. I guess that this would be kind of the white amass mechanic for one card.
I
Just
guess
only on this one card though.
Yeah, it's again, it's not a card you're gonna really want to fill in your deck with unless you have to. Then we have Sunblade Angel. It's a 6-mana 3/3 with Flying, First Strike, Vigilance, and Lifelink. So 4 very relevant abilities. It could use another point of toughness, but I think it's a really good card. If you open it, you probably want to play it at the top of your curve.
Next is Teo's Light Shield. It's a 3-mana 0/3, but when it enters the battlefield, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control.
It can target itself, and I think that's the only situation where it's okay. Having a 1/4 for 3 is just okay, and having a 0/3 for 3 is not good. Then we have Tomik, Distinguished Advocist. He is a 2-mana 2/3 with flying. Lands on the battlefield and land cards in graveyards can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control, and then your opponents can't play lands from the graveyards. That's not really going to see a whole lot of relevance in the format. There are a few things that go after lands, but for the most part, you want to play him just because he's a 2-mana 2/3 with flying.
Next is Trusted Pegasus. 3-mana 2/2 with flying. And whenever Trusted Pegasus attacks, target attacking creature without flying gains flying until end of turn. So, I mean, it's good. Helps you push in some damage. The 2/2 for 3 kind of stinks, but the flying makes up for it a little bit, I think.
I think without the attack ability, you'd probably still play this. So that's just a little bit of icing on the cake. Then we have War Screecher, which is a 2-mana 1/3 with flying. Has a activated ability of pay 6 and tap it to give other creatures you control +1/+1 until end of turn. You probably don't want to play this either. It's not a very powerful creature until turn 6 or 7, and then you have to have other things to go with it. Alright, so we're on to blue creatures now.
Yeah, I guess first is Ashiok Skulker. It's a 5-mana 3/5 with an ability for 4 that Ashiok Skulker can't be blocked this turn.
This is a pretty good creature for a common. Has 5 toughness, which, like we've said, is a pretty big deal. It gets around a lot of the removal, and then being able to make it unblockable late game is pretty crucial. Next is Augur of Bolas. We've seen this card before. It's a 2-mana 1/3. When it enters the battlefield, you can look at the top 3 cards of your library, reveal an instant or sorcery, and put it in the hand. It's okay. I think you got to have kind of a critical mass to want to play him. And you really, 1 out of 3 cards needs to be an instant or sorcery, and I don't think you do that in limited. So he might be an okay blocker. He's not a great attacker. He's probably not going to replace himself when you play him, so it's not on the top of my list.
Next is Aven Eternal. 3-mana 2/2 with flying, and then when Aven Eternal enters the battlefield, amass 1. Again, a 2/2 for 3, not the greatest, but it does have flying to make up for it. And then this one actually can either grow something or make you another guy. So you essentially get 3 power for 3 mana.
With evasion.
Yeah.
I think this is a good card and you should play it if you open it and want to play blue. Next is Erratic Visionary, which is a 2-mana 1/3. Has the activated ability of pay 2 and tap to loot. It's fine. It's not great. I'm not thrilled about it, but...
The thing to remember, I think, with that, though, is that it's draw a card first and then discard. Yes. So you don't have to have a card in your hand if, for some reason, you want to use the ability.
Well, yeah, then you just bin the card you draw,
Yep.
So... I guess if you scry and you know what's there, I guess that would be something. Next is Eternal Skylord. 5-mana 3/3. When he enters, you amass 2, and he makes your zombie tokens have flying. So you're paying 5 mana for a 5/5 power toughness, which is fine. And then the token that it makes or grows has flying, which is evasion, which is always good. How do we pronounce this one?
Yeah, I guess Fibblethip is what I heard a couple times rolling around here. So I guess Fibblethip the Lost, a 2-mana 1/1 legendary creature at that. When it enters the battlefield, you get to draw a card, and if it entered from your library or was cast from your library, you draw 2 cards instead. And then when it becomes a target of a spell, shuffle it into its owner's library. I guess note that it's a spell and not an ability.
Yep. The funny part is, you notice that they didn't put Fibblethip the Lost into its owner's library, so there's a bit of a typo on the card. But he's a 1/1 that replaces himself, so he's not that bad.
I mean, in limited, I think it's a like he enters the battlefield. He's a 1/1 for 2 if you need some filler.
Yeah.
And you open it, you can do it, and maybe you get a second card.
You get the memes too.
Yeah.
All right. Next is Flux Channeler, 3 mana for a 2/2. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, proliferate. Doesn't do anything on its own. If you have stuff that has counters on it, then you can start proliferating, but kind of vanilla unless you have stuff to go with it.
I guess this is the next god that's up. God Eternal Kefnet. 4 mana 4/5 with flying. And then when you may reveal the first card you draw each turn as you draw it. Whenever you reveal an instant or a sorcery card this way, copy that card and you may cast the copy, and the copy costs 2 generic less to cast. I guess the big thing for this is that people need to remember that it's as you draw the card. So as soon as that card hits your hand,
you can't reveal it anymore.
You're done.
You'll notice a lot of people that play Miracles, they will draw it separate from their hand and look at it. So you don't need to reveal every single draw, just the ones you want to cast for 2 less.
And only, yeah, I say the ones you want to cast are the ones that you want them to see.
Sure, if you want to play some mind games.
Yep.
And you're making a copy and casting the copy, so that card still goes to your hand. It doesn't consume the card. Then we have Kiyora's Dambreaker, 6 mana, 5/6. When it enters the battlefield, proliferate. It's not bad on its own. You get a little bonus from the proliferate. The 6 toughness is really what makes this playable, I think. But you don't necessarily need to play it if you've got better cards to play.
Next is Naga Eternal, 3 mana 3/2 with no abilities. So I mean, it's if you gotta have filler, 3 power is okay. The 2 toughness makes it really bad though at 3.
Yeah, it's not going in my deck. Then we have Rescuer Sphinx, a 3/2 flyer for 4 mana. When it enters the battlefield, you may return a non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. If you do, it enters with a 1/1 counter on it. It's fine. If you have something that you want to reuse, like a planeswalker, like an uncommon planeswalker, you can kind of reset the loyalty on it and make a 4/3 flyer for 4, which would be totally playable.
I think they missed a little flavor though with not giving it flash.
Yes, if it had flash, it'd be really good. It'd probably be a rare then too.
Next is Silent Submersible, 2 mana artifact vehicle. That's a 2/3. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player or a planeswalker, draw a card, and you only crew for 2. So I think it's actually pretty good.
It's pretty good. You're probably not going to attack with it on, well, of course not on turn 2.
Right.
Turn 3, you have to play a 2 power creature to basically be able to attack with it, but it generates card advantage, and if you're keeping the board clear, I think it's a really good vehicle. Next we have Sky Theater Strix, which is a 2 mana 1/2 with flying, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it gets +1 power. It's okay. You're not going to be playing too many non-creature spells in limited, so in that aspect, it's probably not going to get in for a lot of damage. And if you're playing blue, you probably want to play on the other person's turn, so it's not really going to make the cut for my decks.
I guess next we're into black, and we have Duskmantle Operative, 2 mana 2/2, and then it can't be blocked by creatures with power 4 or greater. I guess it's okay. I mean, if you're playing against something that's big,
Yeah.
then it's going to get in for 2, but most of the time you're going to have, I think, 3 power and 2 power creatures on the opposite side of the board right now. So
Yep. One little trick you could do is Defiant Strike their 3 power creature, and then this is unblockable, but you're getting in for 2 damage, which I guess if it's the last 2, that's good. Next we have Spark Double, 4 mana. It is an illusion, so it enters as a copy of something else, and in this case, it's a creature or planeswalker that you control, but it enters with a +1/+1 counter on it if it's a creature, or it enters with an additional loyalty if it's a planeswalker, and then it's not legendary. So it's the first thing we've seen that really copies a planeswalker, which is interesting. Most of the time in Limited, you're not going to be playing these clone effects, but with it being able to copy a planeswalker, that makes it a little bit more versatile.
Next is Spellkeeper Weird, 3 mana 1/4. It has an activated ability to pay 2 and tap it and sacrifice it to return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. I don't think there's anything like Banefire in limited for this, so
Unless you have a really bomb instant or sorcery to get back, you're probably not playing him because it's 5 mana over 2 turns to get a spell back. So then we have Thunder Drake, which is a 4 mana 2/3 flyer, and when you cast your second spell each turn, a +1/+1 counter on it. So it grows permanently, which is nice, but it forces blue to play 2. Well, I guess it's on either turn, so that is nice too. You can play 2 spells on their turn and still.
Thing to know though is it's any spell, not an
It's not a non-creature spell.
So next is Wall of Runes, 1 mana 0/4 wall with Defender. When it enters the battlefield, scry 1. I don't mind this card. I kind of like it.
I like this card. You get card selection, and there's a lot of 2 and 3 power creatures that it can block all day long. And blue usually wants to get to the late game, so I think it's good. Did we go out of order?
No, I think you had one black card out of order.
Oh, all right. Well, I guess we have Banehound, which is a 1/1 with lifelink and haste for 1.
Death Touch would be better than
I don't really care about this card because in limited you usually don't play many 1-drops. It's got 2 abilities, which is nice, but we'll go on.
Next is Charity Extractor, 4 mana 1/5 with lifelink. I actually think this card, it's a little bit better than filler. It's got 5 toughness, and the fact that it just stalls a board. Nobody can just willy-nilly attack into you with two power creatures or 2 toughness creatures because you are gaining some of that life back.
Yeah, it forces them to have 3 power on board to really make an effective attack, and it's okay. It's not in the top of my pick, but I'd play it if I had to. Then we have Dread Malkin, 1 mana 1/1 with Menace. Pay 3, sacrifice another creature, a Planeswalker, and put 2 1/1 counters on him. It's okay. If I had to play a 1-drop, I'd play this over the other one. Most of the time you're going to want to sacrifice an uncommon Planeswalker that you just ran out of loyalty on, and that's fine. And it does have evasion, which is nice.
Next, Eternal Taskmaster, 2 mana 2/3. It enters the battlefield tapped, so you have to remember that. But when it attacks, you may pay 3, and if you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So the thing to note is that though 2 mana creatures typically aren't great late game, this could actually be a backbreaker.
Yep, getting things back. It gives you card advantage, which is nice. Then we have another one of the gods, God Eternal Bantu, 5 mana 5/6 for Menace. When he enters the battlefield, sacrifice any number of other permanents, then draw that many cards. This card is awesome. You've got the 6 toughness, which is key to survive the removal spells in the format. If they end up using an exile or destroy creature effect or sacrifice creature effect, you just put him back in your library and you get to reuse his ability. Sacrifice a bunch of useless early drops or planeswalkers with no loyalty. That's a great card.
Next is Herald of the Dreadhorde, 4 mana 3/2, and then when it dies, you amass 2. So I guess 4 mana for a 3/2, and then when it dies, you get a 2/2.
So it's kind of like 5/4 for 4, 5 power, 4 toughness. I mean, it's okay.
You're probably playing it if you get 1.
It's okay. It can generate card advantage, so it's good, I guess. And then we have Lazotep Behemoth, 5 mana 5/4, absolutely no abilities. If you need filler, it's a filler card. I wouldn't play it if you don't have to.
Next is Lazotep Reaver, 2 mana 1/2, and when it enters the battlefield, amass 1. So again, I mean, you basically get a 2/3 for 2.
Yeah, I like this card because you get 2 bodies, so your power toughness exceeds the mana cost, and you get 2 bodies out of it. So I like it. And we talked about this one in the previous video, but she's a creature, so here she is, Masker Girl, 5 mana for a 4/4 with Menace, and then she has this effect when she enters, each other creature gets -1/-1, and then whenever a creature dies this turn, each creature other than her gets -1/-1. So you've just got that stacking effect of killing creatures, which is very flavorful for her.
Next is Shriek Diver, a 3 mana 2/1 with flying, and then you can pay 1 and it gains haste until end of turn. So to use it to its full abilities, you want to use it on turn 4, and I think a 2-1 with flying on turn 4 is not really going to make the cut.
And there's several cards that have reach and 1 power, and this just loses to them, so you probably don't play this card. Next, Spark Reaper, 3 mana for a 2/3. You can pay 3, sacrifice a creature or planeswalker. You gain a life and draw a card. It's okay. You can make up some good blocks and draw cards with the things that are going to die, so I like it in that aspect.
Next, Tidebearer Giant, 6 mana 4/5, and when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. I don't mind it. 6 is kind of high for it, but you do get to draw a card. So, I mean, losing the 1 life is not that big a deal.
I like things that replace themselves.
Yep.
Then we have Vampire Opportunist, a 2 mana 2/1, pay 7, and each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Not thrilled with this card. These super high casting cost abilities. You have to make it to turn 7 before you can do a 2-point drain life, and it's only got 1 toughness, so it can die to just about anything.
Next, Vizier of the Scorpion, 3 mana 1/1, and then when it enters the battlefield, amass 1. But the thing to note is that zombie tokens you control have Death Touch, so if you're playing a bunch of amass spells, you can pick off anything big they have with your 1/1s.
Makes your amass tokens deadly.
Yep.
Then we have Vraska's Finisher, which is a 3 mana 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls that was dealt damage this turn. So this is a really good creature. You're going to play it. There's going to be creatures and planeswalkers to take out with it.
Next is the first red card that we have, and it's On-Crop Invader, 3 mana 2/2. As long as it's your turn, it has first strike. You could pay 1, sacrifice another creature, and then it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So on your turn, you could have it be a 4/2.
Well, you can use the ability
for a 6. I'd say a 6/2.
Yeah, you can use the ability as many times as you want. I'm not very thrilled with it. These on your turn first strike creatures are always a trap in my opinion. They just can't block at all. So if you're playing a hyper aggressive deck, it's good, but you're playing a 3 mana 2/2 and you're sacrificing the rest of your board to make it bigger. Next we have Burning Prophet, a 2 mana 1/3. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn, then scry 1. This is a card I'm excited about, but not necessarily for limited, because you're not trying to cast too many non-creature spells.
Next is Chain Whip Cyclops, 5 mana 4/4, and then for 4, target creature can't block this turn. The 4 is actually, like, paying the 4 to make something not be able to block. You get in for the last couple points of damage if you needed to is pretty good.
Yep. The 4 toughness gets around a lot of the removal spells, but not all of them. So I think this is playable. Then we have a card we talked about in the previous video again, Cyclops Electromancer. He's a 5 mana 4/2, and then when it enters the battlefield, deals X damage to a creature an opponent controls, where X is the number of instants and sorceries in your graveyard. It's fine. If you have instants and sorceries, you can use it as a removal spell.
Yep. Then you have Devouring Hellion, 3 mana 2/2, and then as it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice any number of creatures or planeswalkers. If you do, it enters with twice that many +1/+1 counters on it. So, I mean, if you're playing a red deck that has a whole bunch of
useless creatures and planeswalkers,
you have a big Hellion that has no evasion, I guess.
Yeah, going all in on a creature is probably not the greatest plan. If you have planeswalkers with no loyalty, you could use it. But then we have Dreadhorde Arcanist, 2 mana 1/3 with trample. When it attacks, you may cast an instant or sorcery with CMC less than or equal to its power from your graveyard without paying its mana cost, and then exile it. I like the card on paper, but I don't know that it'll see much use in Limited because you really need ways to increase its power because there's not really any 1 mana spells to cast with it.
Then you have Dreadhorde Twins, 4 mana 2/2. And then when it enters the battlefield, amass 2, and zombie tokens you control have trample. Pretty good with the black one that gives them Death Touch as well.
Very good. Next one, Goblin Assailant, a 2 mana 2/2. Don't play it.
Goblin Assault Team, a 4 mana 4/1 with haste, and when it dies, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. I think more often than not, it's a 4/1 that's just not attacking.
Yeah, it dies to everything.
Yep.
Which I guess has an ability when it does, but
If you don't have anything else.
yeah, then it's not doing anything. Grim Initiate, 1 mana, 1/1 with first strike. When it dies, amass 1. This isn't horrible. It gets through quite a few attackers, but I typically don't like 1-drops in limited.
Next, you have a card that I think is actually pretty good. Ilharg the Razebore. 5 mana, 6/6 with trample. And then when it attacks, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. Return that creature to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. And then, of course, the same way as the gods, you can put it into your library if it dies or goes into exile. I think it's pretty good if you have just an absolute bomb that you want to protect every single turn, and you know that the Razebore can get through it. You can keep bouncing that card back, or if it has entered the battlefield effect, you can use that over and over again.
And card advantage in limited is at a premium, so being able to play the creature and then bring it back and play it again at return forces them to take actions. Then we have Invading Manticore, 6 mana, 4/5, and it enters amass 2. So you're kind of getting like a 6/7 for 6, which is just okay, and there's no evasion, so moving on.
Next you have Krenko, 10 Street Kingpin, 3 mana, 1/2. And then whenever he attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Then create a number of 1/1 red goblin creature tokens equal to Krenko's power. I don't think you're doing a lot with it unless it sits there unanswered all game.
Turn 4, if they can't remove it, then you start getting value out of it. And it does get out of control at that point, but it's not great. Mizium Tank. This is the red vehicle. 3 mana. It's a 3/2 vehicle with trample. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it becomes an artifact creature and gets +1/+1. The crew ability is 1. I think it's a good card, and the fact that you get to crew it for free when you cast a non-creature spell is pretty crucial.
Next you have Neheb, Dreadhorde Champion, 4 mana, 5/4 with trample. And then whenever it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, you may discard any number of cards. If you do, draw that many cards and add that much red mana. Until end of turn, you don't lose mana as steps and phases end. So I guess a pseudo ramp card if you make it past 4.
Yep. Raging Crunch. 3 mana, 4/3 that can't attack alone. Just, it's a trap, don't play it. It's going to sit there and they're going to destroy the other creatures in play.
Next you have Spellgorger Weird. 3 mana, 2/2. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on it. I guess if you absolutely have to.
Yeah, it's not great. You don't have that many non-creature spells in limited, so. Then we have Tybalt's Rager. It's not the greatest name. It's a 2 mana, 1/2. When it dies, it deals 1 damage to any target, and you can pay 2 to give it +2/+0. It's okay. Doesn't have evasion, and you gotta kind of hold up mana to threaten the trade, so.
Next is Turret Ogre. 4 mana, 4/3. It has reach, but when it enters the battlefield, if you control another creature with power 4 or greater, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. So a free shock if you have something that's similar size, I guess, or another one of these since it is a common. It's a pretty good all-around card.
It's not bad. It's very rare to see a red creature with reach, and what's worth noting is the 3 toughness does block all of the 2 power flyers. Alright, moving on to green, we've got Arboreal Grazer. 1 mana for a 0/3 with reach, and when it enters, you can cheat a land into play. I'd just skip this card. If you're playing green, you don't want blockers.
Yeah. Next is Arlen's Wolf, a 3 mana, 3/2, and it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. I guess it makes you offer the trade.
Yeah. Bloom Hulk, a 4 mana, 4/4. When it enters, proliferate. 4 mana, 4/4 is not bad on its own. If you have anything to go with the proliferate, it's probably worth playing.
Next is Centaur Nurturer, 4 mana, 2/4. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life, and you could tap it to add 1 mana of any color. I think you're probably not playing it so much in limited unless you're struggling for a slot or you need a little bit of extra life gain because you're taking damage early.
The 2/4 also blocks pretty well, so if you're taking that stance on your deck, you can play it. Challenger Troll, 5 mana, 6/5. Each creature you control with power 4 or greater can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. So if you've got a lot of big creatures, it gives them pseudo evasion. which makes combat really complicated.
Next is a card I really like, Evolution Stage. 3 mana, 3/2. And whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, proliferate. I think that if you've got something that you can proliferate with and you have this card, you're automatically playing it.
Then we have the God Eternal Aronis, 5 mana, 5/5 with Death Touch. When it enters the battlefield, double the power of each other creature you control until end of turn, and those creatures gain Vigilance. So again, if you open a God, you're playing it. It's ridiculously good, and being able to reuse the ETB effect is even better.
Next is Crawl Stinger, 3 mana, 2/2 with Death Touch. I guess if you have to, maybe a sideboard option, something there to bring in.
Yeah, the Death Touch is nice. It's not a lot of power for the cost, though.
Nope.
Then we have Crotch Wrangler, 2 mana, 2/1 with Trample. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. I'm not thrilled about it. Anything with 1 toughness is just kind of meh in my book.
Next is Mo Loyal Companion, 4 mana, 3/3, Trample and Vigilance, and if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on it, put that many +1/+1/+1 counters on it instead. So very hard to get through the text.
+1/+1/+1 counters.
Yes. So I don't know if it'll have a whole lot of impact unless you open up the planeswalkers that give you counters at all. But
yeah, you have to have a way to put counters on it, and then proliferate can get really out of hand. And it does have evasion, well, trample evasion.
Yeah.
Which is nice. So you got to have the right deck for it. Then we have Paradise Druid, 2 mana, 2/1. As long as it's untapped, it has hexproof, and it taps for any color of mana. This is a really good card. I don't know if it will make it into many limited decks. Probably will. But it's definitely going to see play in Standard.
Next is Pollen Bright Druid, 2 mana, 1/1. But when it enters the battlefield, you get to choose one of 2 abilities. You either put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, or you get to proliferate. I think this thing in multiples, if you're playing green, you play as many as you absolutely can.
Yeah, and you can play them after Mowu.
Yep.
Primordial Worm, 6 mana, 7/6. Goodbye.
Next is Snare Spinner, 2 mana, 1/3 with Reach. And it blocks whenever it blocks a creature with flying, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So I think, you
this has
open
got
this.
the thumbs up.
Yeah, you're definitely playing this as well.
It doesn't attack well, but it blocks and kills a lot of flyers in the blue-white deck.
And it gets you to your bigger creatures in green.
Yep. All right, then we have Thundering Ceratok, 5 mana, 4/5 with Trample. When it enters the battlefield, other creatures you control gain Trample. It's fine. You can play it.
Next is Vivian's
Nothing to say
Grizzly.
about that card.
3 mana, 2/3. It has an ability that's interesting. You pay 4, look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature or planeswalker, you may reveal it and put it in your hand. If you don't put the card in your hand, put it on the bottom of your library. You almost want to know what it is before using the ability because it could be something else you really desperately need.
Yep. I do like it for late game. If you're going long, you get to generate card advantage. And most of the time in a limited deck, you're running 15 creatures or something. So, you have a 1 in 4 chance of... better than a 1 in 3 chance of hitting something. And then we have Ward Scale Crocodile, 5 mana for a 5/3 with Hexproof. I think it's playable because of the Hexproof. It's really hard to deal with Hexproof. And that's it. It hits hard, but it dies to a lot of creatures in the format. And now the gold creatures.
First one's Bioessence Hydra. 5 mana, 4/4 with a lot of text. It has Trample. It enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each loyalty counter on planeswalkers you control. And then whenever 1 or more loyalty counters are put onto planeswalkers you control, put that many +1/+1 counters on Bioessence Hydra. A 4/4 for 5 with Trample, I guess, would be okay if you are in those 2 colors and you had to, or if you have a one particular planeswalker that, does something for you, but I don't know. It's good.
It can get out of hand, but you really have to have planeswalkers for it to do that. Then we have Cruel Celebrant, 2 mana, 1/2, and whenever that creature or another creature or planeswalker you control dies, each opponent loses life and you gain life. It can make combat math tricky. It's okay. I mean, what was the? There's a whole bunch of 1/1s with the same.
All the
similar-
aristocrats.
Yeah, all the aristocrats they see play. So
Yep. Next is Dreadhorde Butcher, 2-mana 1/1 with haste, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And whenever it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. I really like this card for any sort of red-black deck. The fact that it actually doubles up every single time that you're there, or
it doesn't.
I guess it does double up.
Yeah,
But
it gets bigger every time.
it's probably going to be a 2, and then
Yeah.
that's going to stop there.
Played
because
on turn
it's
2,
gonna
it'll be
kill it,
a 2/2, and then if you trade with a 2/2, you can kill a 2/2.
Yeah.
So it can pseudo generate card advantage.
Yep.
Elite Guard Mage, 4-mana 2/3 flying. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life and draw a card. If you're playing blue-white, you're playing this. It replaces itself, gains life, and it's a decent body to attack with. Dies to the spider.
Next is Feather the Redeemed, 3-mana 3/4 with flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets a creature you control, exile that card instead of putting it into your graveyard as it resolves. If you do, return to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. So I guess the thing to say is that if you have a shock for some reason, you could target it, bring it back, kill something later if you wanted to protect the card somehow, but
It's weird corner cases for limited, and who knows for other formats. Then we have Gleaming Overseer. I guess it is a 3/4 with flying. For 3.
It's playable if you're in Boros, I guess.
Yeah. So 3 mana, 1/4 Dimir, and it is, let's see, when it enters the battlefield, amass 1. So you're basically getting 2 power and 5 toughness for 3 mana, which is good. And zombie tokens you control have hexproof and menace, so it gives them evasion and makes them harder to kill. So I think this is, if you're in Dimir colors, it's definitely a playable.
Next is Squatley's Raptor, 1 green, 1 white for a 2/3 with vigilance. And as it enters the battlefield, or when it enters the battlefield, you proliferate. I actually think it's pretty good. If you're in Celestia colors, you just play this. A 2/3 with vigilance is okay. It's not amazing, but late game, if you do have something else to proliferate with.
Yeah, if you just ignore the proliferate part,
Yep.
it's still a playable card. Then we have Leyline Prowler, a 3 mana 2/3 in Golgari colors with Death Touch, Lifelink, and taps for any color of mana. I like this card a lot. It's very versatile. It's a good blocker. It's a good attacker.
Next is Living Twister, 3 mana 2/5 with pay 1 red, discard a land card. Living Twister deals 2 damage to any target, or pay green, return a tapped land you control to its owner's hand. I guess it's not horrible for the fact that if you're flooding out, or if you have flooded out and draw this late game, you could pay 3 to deal 2. I mean, you're not doing anything else with your lands, so you might as well throw them at your opponent.
I think it's definitely a playable if you want to commit to Gruul colors.
Yeah.
Then we have Mayhem Devil, 3 mana Rakdos, 3/3. Whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, it deals 1 damage to any target. So it's worth noting that it will trigger when you or your opponent sacrifice permanents. So I think it's playable if you're in Rakdos.
Next is Merfolk Skydiver, 1 green, 1 blue for a 1/1 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, and then you can pay 5 to proliferate. I guess it's a 2/2 with flying for Simic when it enters the battlefield. So if you do draw it late, you can make it bigger. You could make something that's already big enough bigger.
Yeah, you don't have to target a different creature. It can just be a 2/2 when it enters. And then we have Niv Mizzet Reborn. If you're willing to play this in limited,
Good luck.
good luck. 5 mana, 1 of each color, 6/6 flying. So I guess the body checks out.
Yep.
And then when it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each color pair, so for each guild, choose a card that's exactly those colors from among them. Put the chosen cards in your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library. So you can't play single colored cards with this, which it's going to be impossible.
So you're
play.
hoping to open every rare uncommon
you're
gold
just not
card.
you're not
Yeah.
playing this unless I don't know, you're crazy.
Unless you got 2.
Or you have all the mana dorks that tap for any
Yeah.
color.
Next is I guess it's Rolex. I don't know.
It's Rolex.
Yeah, sure. Apex Hybrid. A 5 mana 4/5 with flying and trample. And then when it enters the battlefield, put 2 +1/+1 counters on another target creature you control. And when it dies, proliferate, then proliferate again. I think this card's really good in both the standard, but especially in the limited formats. 4/5 with both flying and trample. And if you have a way to put a counter on it, the fact that it becomes a 5/6 that would get around just about anything, double blocking it too.
It's very hard to kill outside of the Chandra's 5 damage spell or the Obnixilis -5/-5, or direct removal. I think it's a great card, and if you open it, you probably force Simic. Then we have Rubble Belt Rioters, 3 mana Gruul, 0/4 with haste. When it attacks, it gets plus... I'm just going to stop reading it. Don't play this card. You have to have another creature to even get power out of it.
Next is Soul Diviner. 2 mana 2/3. You can tap it to remove a counter from an artifact, creature, land, or planeswalker you control to draw a card. Really good if you have those planeswalkers that are ticking down and you can't do anything with. So
any way to draw cards, you can,
especially for 2.
Yep, and it blocks a decent amount of stuff. Then we have Storev, Devkaren Lich, Golgari 4 mana, 5/4 with trample. When it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, return to your hand target creature or planeswalker card in your graveyard that wasn't put there this combat. Very weird wording. Basically, I think it's good. With trample, it's probably always going to deal damage unless they put a lot of stuff in front of it, and you get to recur things that didn't die this combat. So it's a good card.
Next is 10th District Legionnaire. 2/2 for 2 with haste. Whenever you cast a spell that targets it, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then scry 1. I think if you have a lot of combat tricks in Boros, it's okay. But outside of that, you're just basically getting a 2/2 with haste.
Yeah, you need to be playing hyper aggro to play this card. Tolsimir, Friend to Wolves. So this is a 5 mana Celestia legendary, 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, create a Voja, Friend of Elves, legendary 3/3 green and white wolf creature token. Whenever a wolf enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 3 life, and that creature fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. So this is 6 power and toughness, plus a fight ability, plus gain 3 life for 5. I think it's a really good card, and if you open the Arlen Planeswalker to follow up on turn 6, or earlier if you ramp, it gets even better. We're back at the beginning, so I guess we covered all the cards. So hopefully you guys can take some, advice from our terrible advice to know what to play and what to not play at the pre-release. So thanks for watching, and if you aren't subscribed, subscribe.